Hey everyone, so we are here with Seth Williams, who is going to talk about classroom engagement theories or practices that he has learned throughout his teaching career. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Seth.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to be talking mostly about practices because I'm the kind of person whenever I go to professional development, it's great to hear like the why of why we're doing these strategies, but I am more interested into application of how, like, what are some real things that I could take back to my classroom, things that I can implement, both in an online or in-person setting. So I do have stuff for both modalities of teaching. So I am a high school teacher, but I also teach at Fresno City and at Reedley as well. So I'm, like I said, I'm an English teacher. I did my first 2 years of teaching were at a middle school. And like it says in the parentheses there, I would not recommend. I taught seventh grade for my first 2 years of teaching, and it was literally the worst experience of my life. I'm actually at the high school now, so I apologize for the overhead call that's going down. Um, Sorry. I've taught all grade levels of high school, freshmen to seniors for the last 10 years. I'm also the yearbook advisor at my high school, and I've been doing that for 8 years. And then I've been teaching as an adjunct at Reedley and Fresno City for the last 3 years. So both as a dual enrollment instructor, but also I've taught hybrid classes at night on fully online classes. So I definitely have experience with all those different types of teaching. So like it says, I do want you guys, you don't have to, I mean, since there's so few of us, it wouldn't be overwhelming. You can unmute if you want to, but if you can't, if you guys could like type in the chat just so that, it's like I'm not testing you or anything, but just the whole point of this is engagement. So obviously I would like to have some engagement within this presentation as well. So if you guys could, that'd be awesome. Just to the best of your ability, and I will try to respond to the chat as much as I can. So, um, okay. So what does engagement look like in your class if you do teach a class, or in your uh, wherever you're from in your college? So, like I said, you could either raise your hand, or you could type in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself, just because there's so few of us. So go ahead.
I will talk and then let someone else talk if they want to.
Sure, and I could
Um,
also add my 2 cents in that too. So
for engagement, there's someone in the waiting room. Awesome. For engagement in my class, I try and get my students to kind of talk with each other. So I do different types of like group work, but I'll do like speed dating type stuff where they pair up and then they switch people. And so they're not always with the same person. So that if they get someone who's really quiet, they'll then maybe be able to work with someone who's not so quiet. So um Paria added asking, answering questions, participating in lab class activities,
uh,
etc.
okay, great, thank you. And then it's Manjeet, I see, just joined us. So Manjeet, we're just kind of sharing like what we have done in our classes as far as like engagement. So you could either type in the chat, you can unmute, it's your call. But and then Iris too, if you have anything you wanted to add. But I'm gonna get to like some of the obviously types of engagement strategies that I do. And okay, online, so weekly announcements, video, assignment review. Yeah, I've been trying to include videos at the beginning of my modules for each week, just as a like a way of getting a visual is definitely helpful, I think, for our students to kind of like, especially for online, to get that connection with us. And some people are just better at like hearing it. So um yeah, so and I'm gonna have some stuff that you can take back for online classes too, that you can either do synchronous or asynchronous, whatever your method of teaching is. So, and I know that there's a little timer, but I'm just kind of ignoring the timer right now in the bottom. So we're just gonna go at our own pace. All right. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Manjeet, did you have anything to add to this before I move on? Are you good? Okay, awesome. So yeah, online is definitely difficult. I totally agree. It is very hard to build that connection. I've done primarily for my online classes, I've done like the English 1A with a co-requisite class. And that can be really tricky because you want to give them the extra support, but you also don't want to make like extra work for them too. And try to find ways to make it engaging for them because obviously those are the students who are already struggling or not struggling, but at least need extra support to be successful in 1A for sure. All right. I'm gonna skip past that. Okay. Um, sorry. So one thing that we've kind of talked about, we've done lots of like equity training at my high school, and I've been to different professional development with equity training, and we've talked about this idea of teaching versus learning. So if I teach effectively, doesn't that mean that they should learn the content? And in theory, yes, it seems like it would make sense that if we have good information that we're providing students, we're trying to be as engaging as possible, trying to be interesting for our students. One would think that if we teach it, they should learn it. But one thing that we've been really focused on here at the high school level that I've been trying to implement in my college classes is lots of checks for understanding, obviously. So I know we had in the chat about like asking questions and answering questions. So that's definitely a good starting point to make sure that like just checking in with students and like asking them questions about what they're doing, not waiting till like a summative sort of assessment to like figure out like do they understand it, because by the time you give a summative assessment, obviously it's going to be too late. So you want to do lots of little formative assessments, and formative assessments don't have to be quizzes. They could just be like we said, answering questions. And there's like I said, different things that I'm going to talk about that hopefully you guys will be able to use. So what do you guys think teaching effectively looks like? What does that mean? And again, you can go ahead and unmute or put it in the chat. Engage students. Oh, no worries, no worries. That's totally fine. I had students when I was starting this meeting, so I totally get it. Students ask questions, students are engaged. Yeah, and I think it's good because I one thing that I have students who will say is like they've complained about teachers where they say like, oh, this teacher doesn't teach. And I kind of like have to think about what that means. So it's like I think sometimes students assume that we're the sage on the stage, so we should just be like outputs for them and just like giving information to them. But I definitely do think that like if students are actively doing something in class, whether it's communicating, talking, writing, sharing, doing projects, I definitely think that that's an important thing. Teaching in different ways, good. Yeah, that's definitely good. So one thing that it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, we started talking about UDL, which is universally designed lessons. So giving students different options, so like not only us teaching in different ways, but having students have different options to show mastery of an idea or subject, rather than just saying like this is the only way that you could show it. Students are prepared for group work. Yeah, I definitely think all that is good. So let's go ahead, and we're going to be talking about shifting the focus from teaching to learning, as far as like what to expect from students, not so much, not always like focus on like our information, because again, we are experts in our content areas. So we definitely know we know our stuff, but we need to make sure that our students know the stuff that we know. Okay, so some of the learning modalities, and I got this from a conference that I went to over summer. So I am going to give credit to them. It was at the PLC at Work Institute. And we talked about like the different types of learning. So we talked about these are basically like the best ways that students learn. So obviously the least likely that they're going to like retain information is lecture. So just us talking to them about information. If we just say to them, yes, they might get an understanding of it. If we assign reading to them, they might get 10% of retention. Obviously, we want to get more into the active learning where we have discussion group work, which obviously online is discussion boards, but I'm going to try and give some other tools that you guys can use other than just discussion boards for online practices that might hopefully be more engaging and meaningful for our students. Obviously the practice by doing and teaching others, I definitely like have students give presentations that are meant to teach. So like, for example, in my English 3 class, we just read Walden, and Walden is a very large book and it can be very dense. So rather than have my students just read the entire thing, I split it up into different sections, and I had students basically teach those sections to the rest of the class. They had to give presentations. They had to like talk about like specific pieces of evidence from their sections and talk about like why they were good, like examples from that section of like what their overall purpose was. So I think that was more meaningful, and they actually got a lot more out of it rather than just, you know, hearing me talk about it or reading it just the entire book on their own. It's also, jigsawing is also a great way to obviously divide up large chunks of text too. So, all right. Okay. So which one of the levels of the pyramid do you or your students spend the most time? I know I am probably, I mean, I definitely teaching others is not something that I do all the time. I do it once or twice per semester, probably could do it more. I definitely have a lot of discussions that happen. I try to have some project-based learning. So what do you guys do? Where do you spend most of your time? Like which one of these categories would you guys say you're typically in? Yeah, and I agree that with the online, it does make it more difficult. It's definitely a lot easier to do the teaching others in the hybrid or face-to-face classes. And obviously some content like science, you know, definitely lends itself more to the practice by doing as opposed to us in the humanities, because a lot of it's, you know, more writing or conversational. Discussions online. I like the practicing annotating. That's a good one because that's a very active form of reading. I like to have my students annotate too, even if it's for just like an assignment that's not really worth much, but just to make sure that they've actually done it.
I I'll just unmute and say this because it was
Yeah,
too
go
much
for it.
time. I do discussion boards the first couple of weeks, but then I kind of stop because a lot of times in the online class, and right now I'm just teaching online, a lot of students stop participating in English classes, and I don't know how this is in other classes. And so it looks really bad when there are only a few people and they start getting self-conscious about that. And then I've also noticed that a lot of students are starting to get answers from Chat GPT. So I've sort of stopped and I do more of the one-on-one work where they have to do brainstorming and then I comment on it, which I don't like as much, but it's just the reality of it.
Yeah. What are you are do you, I know most of you are in like different content area other than English. Have you had to adjust any of what you've been doing for AI or anything, or what have been some of your coping mechanisms for that? So I know like I do tend to use zero GBT occasionally just to kind of check, especially if I am looking at something that might look suspicious. I also try to have students do a lot more like low stakes writing at the beginning of class that they wouldn't really need Chat GBT for. So that way I can get an idea of what their voice is like, almost to serve as like kind of like a barometer for what they normally write. So just to kind of get that idea. Um, as far as online goes, it definitely is more difficult because you don't see them as much. But I do actually have, like I said, some things that could potentially help. That's more like verbal and that they could do online. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just keep moving along then. Um, so here are some engagement like strategies or things to think about when it comes to engagement. So um, this is not engagement. So the things that I have listed on this slide are would not be considered engagement. So eye contact from student during a lecture does not necessarily mean that they're engaged. It means they're looking at you, but they could be not processing anything that you're saying. So there's a lot of, I've had lots of students where they look like that they are paying attention, but then you find out like 3 minutes after you are done talking that they didn't really hear a single word you said. So but calling on students to answer questions, even if you randomly call out students, because I know that, I mean, I do this, so I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but just calling out students like one at a time, even if it is random, isn't necessarily true engagement. Because here's the problem with that: if you have 20 students, one student is actively participating while the other 20-ish students are more in that passive learning kind of mode. So you want to make sure that when you do engagement, that you are having as many students as possible interacting with the material or each other, and obviously preferably both. um Asking if everyone understands and not getting a reply back. So having negative feedback or like lack of feedback doesn't mean that they do understand. So sometimes it's good to actually make sure that they do something to prove that they understand, rather than just saying, okay, does everyone understand? No? Okay, great. Let's move on. It's kind of, I've done that a couple of times already in this presentation, so I'm guilty too. So having a quiet class that appears to be working doesn't always mean, obviously, that they are actually engaged. So it just kind of depends on what they are doing. So let's go ahead and talk about why do we try to engage our students. So obviously students have to process content in order to participate. It obviously takes the focus of learning off of the teacher and it puts it back onto the students. We also want to make sure that we're like creating culture for our students where they feel like they're willing to interact with one another, that they're able to get support from one another, that they're able to feel like they're, actual scholars. And we want to make sure that we're maximizing the amount of students who are actively participating. Like I said in the previous slide, having one student respond is great, but it doesn't show that everybody else knows that information too. So here is where I'm going to get into more of the examples. So write, think, pair, share. And admittedly, some of these I have like gone from, if you've ever heard of like Kagan strategies before, some of these are based off of those or directly from them. So write, think, pair, share I like. So you might have heard of like just think, pair, share, but I like to have students write down their thoughts first rather than just giving them think time. Because if I see students writing, I one, know that they're more likely doing the actual work rather than just thinking about it. There's also a variation of it called write, think, mix, share, which is where you would have them physically get up and like go around. So not just talk to the partner. So again, having a little bit of kinetic kind of interaction with each other and having them have a chance to get the blood moving, walk around is definitely important. Quiz, quiz, trade. Has any of you heard of that one? So quiz, quiz, trade is basically where they have it's like flashcards essentially, but they get around the room, they ask each other questions, and again, it's just that chance for movement. Which movement, even at the college level, I know that like a lot of people think of some of these strategies as high school, but I mean, especially like if you're teaching like at the community college level, I mean, I know we have a wide array of age gaps, but we do have a lot of students who did just leave high school. So some of these strategies, even though we're in college, still work for them. And I mean, think about some meetings you've been in where you're just sitting there forever and ever. It's nice to get moving and be able to like physically do stuff. You might not have to do it as often as say like when I taught seventh grade, where I did it like every 3 minutes because some of the kids just had to get up or else they would lose their minds. um Gallery walks are great. I love gallery walks. And they have, I know it can be hard because like that requires material like poster paper. Um, if you Has anybody ever heard of Wipe Book before? Okay, so Whitebook is it's a good investment. It's like they're not the cheapest things in the world, but it's basically you can buy like a poster, like a poster size white book, and it's dry erase essentially. So you can reuse it, and you can have, it's great to, like I said, it's, I forget how much it was. I mean, I want to say it was like $80 or something like that. And it gave you like a pack of them. So it was definitely something that was very useful that I like to use, and I'll bring them like when I'm teaching like in-person classes. Um, One thing that I am going to be showing you guys is how to do podcasts or have student created podcasts, because that's actually one of my favorite things to have students do is to do podcasts. I like them because they don't focus so much on the like image side of things as much, and they get to like really talk about things. And it's actually, there's some really good tools out there on creating podcasts that students can use on their phone, on computers, on tablets, whatever it is they're using. It's like, it's definitely something that they can use. They can have, having students create videos is great too. Obviously there's like a million different like apps that you can use for that. Project-based learning, gamification, which I'm going to show you a couple of examples of gamification a little later on. Jigsawing, so I used the example earlier about Walden breaking up large chunks of text and having students do different pieces of a larger concept or idea and having them share with one another. And then again, student taught lessons.
I have
So
a,
obviously,
oh, I have a question with the white books. What are those? I've never heard of it, and I'm trying to look it up line and I don't see.
okay, let me see if I can find it for just a second and I'll put it in there. But okay. So it would be the flip chart that I'm referring to, but I'll put the just the website in the chat. Um 1 second, sorry. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get the chat back up right now.
I found it. I can stick it in the chat if you want me
Okay,
to.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, whitebook.com. But it's like I said, I generally use the flip chart, so I'll just show that. So okay, it's like $50. So I was, yeah, but like I said, you do get a pack of them, which is great because I mean they're not the sturdiest things in the world, but I'm still using the same ones that I got probably about like 6 years ago. And so they do last. They also have like smaller ones, so but that are more like personal use. But this is, like I said, I use the flip charts all the time for gallery walks. Let me get back to my presentation real quick. Does anybody have any questions in the chat right now, or are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Now I got it. It's been a while since I've actually used Zoom, so I apologize. Okay, so gamification. So these are some different ideas if you wanted to gamify your class. So quizzes is a cool one. It's basically, it started off as like mostly like a flashcard kind of app, but then they've expanded and added more elements. So I'll show you guys some examples of different things you could do with quizzes. Badges, I know that Canvas has had badges that you can add to it. I've admittedly haven't always been able to get it to work, so I haven't really done badges that often. You can have leaderboards for different activities. So like a leaderboard could be based off of like a score that they get, and you have like a competition for like who gets the highest score on an activity, and make it public just within the class. Obviously, we don't want to violate like any FERPA kind of violation or anything, but within the class, you can kind of like say, hey, this student got this, they're like got the highest score. I know this is more people view this as more K-12, but people generally do like Kahoots because it's competitive, it's fun. Um, Breakout box, if you've ever heard of that kind of concept before, it's basically an escape room type puzzle kind of activity. I've done those before. So Breakout EDU is the most like popular one, and they have like pay for kind of like escape rooms, but I've mostly just kind of created my own. They're definitely labor intensive, and they're not always great for critical thinking always, but they're good for like if you're having them memorize terms, or it's more like rote memorization that you're trying to get them to do for a specific thing. But they could be a lot of fun, and it definitely gets students like thinking more like in a puzzle kind of setting. Okay, so this is quizzes, and I know there's a lot of info on this slide right now, but so you have classic mode, which is basically just like a standard quiz. It's student paced. It's good for like just if you want them to kind of study something, but you could also use it for like a quiz as opposed to a Canvas quiz. It's going to give you the same thing, and it might not go into your grade book. So some people don't like using it for that, but it's good because it has memes. It's fun, you know, it gives them like, it's just like a little flashier quiz basically. There's a new mastery peak, which is basically if you were, this would be more like for an in-person setting, or if you did teach a synchronous classroom. So mastery peak is the same quiz, but it's like a gamified version. You get like power ups. Like if you get a question wrong, it'll give you a power up to like basically like nullify the incorrect answer. Has anybody used quizzes before by any chance?
I have not. I've never heard of it.
Okay. Um, you have the instructor pace, the test mode, which test mode is basically just gets rid of all the fun stuff. So I honestly don't know why you would do that and not just use a like test in Canvas. Instructor pace would be more like you do one question at a time as opposed to like letting it be student pace. Um, what I really like though is the paper mode. So it's great for low tech class, or for like if you have classes like in-person classes where there's like a diverse amount of technology or lack of technology. So what you would do is, and I will zoom in to get out of the, so on the paper mode, you would print out these QR codes, and you basically, it prints that you could print up to like, I think it's like 50 or 60 individualized QR codes, and you would give each student their own QR code. Basically, I usually have them write their name on it because it'll say like player 1, player 2, player 3 on it. And if you see on the paper, it says A, B, C, or D. So you can only use it for like multiple choice, but it's a good check for understanding too if you have students do this. So you would have to use your own phone, or if you have a tablet, you would have to download the quizzes app. But basically, you would have students hold up the paper, obviously with the letter that they think is correct at the top. So A, B, C, or D. And then I was worried because I tested this with my students. I was worried that you would have to scan each individual QR code. I am very sorry. Hold on a second. My high school has this music that plays when class is about to start, so I do apologize for you having to hear this.
We can't hear it at all.
Oh, really? Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a teeny noise, but we can't hear it.
Okay, good.
Or I can't.
It's just very loud behind me, so I thought everyone was hearing it. So getting back to the paper mode, when you're scanning on the quizzes app, it's instantaneous. You just literally will scan from one side of the room. So if I did it like this, I scan, it's literally that fast. That's how quick it is. And the cool thing is you actually see in real time what their answer is floating above their heads when they're holding up the QR code. So you can see who's right, who's wrong, because it'll be green for right and red for wrong. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a way to change the colors. So if you are colorblind, unfortunately, I don't think it has that accessibility kind of feature, but you'll still, if you know the letter, you'll know that it's right. It just won't be, you won't get the color coding. But like I said, I've tested it out. It works great. It's a really fun way to like kind of like also get students like to interact with like manipulatives in class is always a good way to get students more engaged too. Does anybody have any questions about quizzes?
So they're holding the paper and then they rotate it to the answer and then you scan it?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Oh,
So and again, it eliminates that need for having like technology for like every student, because and also too, if students forget to bring like a computer or their phone's not charged or whatever the tech issue is that for that evening, or there's no Wi-Fi, you just have to rely on your technology to do it. So like I said, you would have to have a phone or a tablet to do it. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to do it with a computer. So that is the one trade-off though, but again, it's easier to control what you can control versus what the students control. So that is one thing I like about, oh, also on the like classic mode and the mastery, it scores them on how quickly they answer the question. So it's not just so they'll get a higher score if they answer the questions quickly, versus like taking like a year to answer like a single question. So you can give like a tiny bit of extra credit if you want to, for students who have higher scores. You could give them other perks. I've given like homework passes and stuff like that before for getting it, or just like any other like kind of like perk that you can give them is always a fun incentive for students. Student discourse, obviously, talking to people is super important. And I'm going to be stepping away from the slides in a second, and I'm going to show you some stuff on some websites. So I like to have my students record podcasts. It's kind of fun. I get to listen to it like while sometimes like I'm doing like chores or exercising. I'll literally be listening to student created podcasts. Um, I usually have a rubric that goes along with the podcast. I use Padlet. Has anybody ever used Padlet before? Okay. I think Padlet's a fun, like a fun alternative to discussion boards. It gives, like I said, it's a little more visually appealing. It's a great way if you're like wanting students like to like do revision. Like I will sometimes have them like provide like a single paragraph and then they have to revise it. So I'll show some examples of that. Obviously, like I said, I talked about write, pair, share earlier. Video Socratic seminars or spiderweb discussions. Spiderweb discussions is something I just heard about in the last year. I would say it became kind of a thing on my radar. Um, I feel like most people know what Socratic seminars are. If you don't, you can let me know. But spider webs are a variation on like Socratic seminar. So has anybody heard of spiderweb discussions?
I've
So
never heard of that. I could
okay,
guess
so
that.
it operates very similarly to a Socratic seminar where it's a student-led discussion. You can have pre-made questions for students. I typically try to encourage students to come up with their own questions. So, okay, so a Socratic seminar, someone in the chat, Manjeet, said that we don't know what that is. So a Socratic seminar is basically the typical setup is where you have two circles in your classroom. You have an outer circle and an inner circle. So for the outer circle that'd be the listening passive part of the student. So you'd have maybe like 10, 15 students in the outer circle listening in to like 5 students in the inner circle who are like leading a conversation. You have students kind of like come in from the outer circle to the inner circle. They switch places. Um, some people treat them as debates, although people would make the argument that they're not meant to be debates. They're more supposed to be exploratory in nature, where you're supposed to like talk about different subjects. Hold on one second. I gotta plug my computer in. Okay. Um, so yeah, you can treat them to be more of a debate or more of argumentative, but you can also just treat them as like discussing a topic and having them share like what they know about it, share their perspectives, offer argument, counter argument. But a spider web discussion is basically where you as a teacher, you kind of track like the direction of the conversation. So like almost imagine like having a diagram of like the circle of students, and then you like draw lines from one student to the next to kind of show like where the discussion is going. So it's not like one-sided, like one student is taking over the conversation. It's you can like the more lines the better, because that means the more students are interacting and having a back and forth with each other. So it's just like a way to track students. Essentially, it's basically the same thing as a Socratic seminar, where it's a student-led conversation, but you just like are tracking more of the actual discourse that's occurring. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about podcasts, because I think podcasts, and this is something I think can be used in a variety of different contents, but it's a great way to hear students have conversations. And I'm going to show you guys, you can, even in a fully online class, you can have students talk to each other using a certain website or app. So if you want to have them talk to a partner in and they don't have to actually like meet in person, which I know can be an issue for people who are in like the online setting. So it gives students a chance to think about what they're going to say if they mess up, because I know I've already messed up some of the things that I was going to say in this presentation. It gives students that second opportunity to go back and re-record. There's in what I'm going to show you, which is actually Spotify. It's basically Spotify for creators. So let me go ahead and show you guys how this works. So Spotify, so if it's creators.spotify.com, and I will put this in the chat in just a second. But this is what it looks like once you're logged in. So this is like a podcast that I've actually created, because I record podcasts for my students to listen to. Sometimes it'll be need to know things. Sometimes it's more just like nice to know, where they're getting extra information. But it's kind of cool. It literally gets posted to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And so like you could add, I actually have my podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify right now. So technically, if you really wanted to, you could listen to it. It probably won't be very interesting to you. But so what you would do is you would have students, and I usually make videos to show my students. Like I'll do like a screencast where I show them how to get to this information. They do have apps for mobile devices, but if you go to new episode, it'll take you to this page, and where it says need to record an episode, you just click that and then go to Riverside. So there is a process, unfortunately, with this. So there are multiple steps. So it would definitely be something that I would recommend making like directions that have like the different steps on how to do this. So when you go to record, and a lot of podcasts have become video and audio. So a lot of podcasts have a video component to it. You can have them do video if you wanted to, or you could just have them do audio only. Obviously, audio only will be a smaller file, so that's kind of nice too. If they have Wi-Fi issues, it won't be as like, it won't lag as much. It'll be easier to upload. So this is what it looks like though when you're getting ready to record. The cool thing about using this website though is what I'm about to show you, this invite button here. So if you click on invite, and if I copy the link, or you can invite via email and you can enter their email right there. But so I'm going to paste the link in the chat actually. And Lori or anyone else, if you want to like test it, if you click on the link, you should show up here.
It says, let's check your cam and mic, enter your name, blah, blah, blah. I allow.
You might have to log in. So it might be a little more of a process than just like clicking on it. But once you do that, basically you can record remotely with the other person by just sharing the link though, which is really cool. I actually, for one of my, back when I used to teach sophomores, have you all heard of the book Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka? I'm sure I know Lori definitely probably has, but I see her nodding. Okay, so yeah. I'm gonna exit out of this so I don't have the feedback though.
It was me because I went on it and I have my mic on.
Oh, no worries, no worries. But yeah, but it's that easy though to like have students record a conversation with one another. So it's really a really cool, fun way to do it. But What I was going to say is that I actually taught a graphic novel version of Metamorphosis to my sophomores for the high school level. And I actually interviewed the artist behind the graphic novel who lives in New York. So I shared a link with him and I recorded an episode where I asked him questions about creating it. And I shared it with my students using that app. So like I said, it's a really cool tool. And like, I know, especially our online students, I've had students who are in the military who've had to like go on location before who are participating and they still are able to like record with each other on that.
So
So
they do a podcast, like two of them are doing the podcast together.
yeah. And so that gives them a chance to like have a different type of discussion that's not just a discussion board. So like it's a good alternative if you're tired, if you want to mix it up and not do a discussion board every week. You could do maybe the discussion board like every other week and then do a podcast on the in between weeks. So that way they're still having a conversation and just, you know, giving them a chance to actually communicate to one another, which is one of the things I feel like is lacking in an online class sometimes is that chance to actually talk to somebody because some people are way better at expressing themselves verbally than they are typing it out.
So like in English, like if they're, or it doesn't matter if it's English, but if they're supposed to write about something, instead you say, okay, I'm going to pair you up with someone, or, you know, well, and sometimes my students disappear, so that could be tricky, but I'm going to pair you up and then you're going to talk about this question for 5 minutes with each other.
Correct. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly how I would use it.
really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. When you said a podcast, I was thinking like one person talking. I wasn't thinking like two people talking together.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I really like about using Spotify for creators is that it gives you that, and technically it's Riverside because it's like a separate website through, but if you use Riverside, so I'm going to go back to it. You would publish it for here and it would basically it would come up in Spotify in your like Spotify for creators home and then you just share either the link. You could have students subscribe to your podcast if you wanted to, which I've had them do. And then I always tell them is like, I'm not getting any money from this, so don't think that that's what's happening. You know, there's no like ads or anything in any of my podcasts. And I always tell them if you really want to, you can unsubscribe at the end of class if you don't want it to be there anymore. So but anyway, so that's how I would use podcasting. And like I said, I think it's a fun alternative. Um, I sometimes, even in my in-person classes, I'll have them do podcasts too, though, because it gives them a chance to record discussions. It's like if you have students have like group conversations with one another, you can't always hear what they're saying. So it gives, you know, you a chance to actually hear everything that was said rather than say, okay, I'm going to have you guys all talk in your groups, go ahead and talk. And then you, even walking around the room, you can't hear everything that's said. And then you also run the risk of when you're walking by certain groups, they might talk when you're near them, but they might start talking about something completely different when you walk away. So, all right, getting back to my slides. So there's easy to use tools. Like I said, it allows for remote controlling. You can actually add music like as intro music or outro music. And again, if you have a Spotify account, it literally could be any song. I always tell students to choose at least clips that are appropriate, even if the whole song isn't appropriate. Try to use, you know, clips of songs that they like that are appropriate. But you can make your own podcast too. Like I said, I share podcasts with my students where I talk about different things. It could be going over the history of something and just giving them some background information. But students can listen to it on demand while they're doing other things. I always tell my students if you're exercising, if you're doing anything that like you can listen to headphones, you can listen to a podcast for the class. So, and for Padlet, so Padlet, if you haven't used it or if you're unfamiliar with it, it basically functions like a discussion board. It's great for discussions with a little more visual interest. Like I said, it's good for evidence collection. If you're having students look through an article or book, they can post different quotes. You could treat it like a living journal too, where students like as they read a book, they can like post like different quotes that they notice and like leave comments about it as they are typing. It's good for brainstorming, or you could even use it as an icebreaker at the beginning, like of a new class, and have students like do an introduction. You can have them put images of themselves in the Padlet and have them like kind of share with one another that way. So these are some of my Padlets. I'm actually going to be doing some on Friday, but I have some from last semester that I did. And I usually post my own directions here as one of the posts included. So that's the first thing that they see. So this was an assignment I did where I was teaching them signal phrasing, where they had to learn how to introduce quotes in a more sophisticated manner that gave more context to the evidence that they were about to use. So I had them do that. And once they did that, then they had to leave a comment underneath where they basically critiqued how well they did or gave them feedback on what they could have done better for this. But so yeah, like I said, this is I love Padlets. I think that they're a fun thing. The only problem with Padlet is that you can only make so many of them in the free version. So you do have to kind of do like musical chairs where you delete some and then make new ones as you go.
The paid
I know I've
version
been
is, I was gonna say the paid version isn't that much, but my issue with Padlets is like, I think students forget to go back on it and look at it, and then the grading of them.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I sometimes for some of these, I don't always treat them as an actual assignment. It might just be like practice. So it's like it might not be something you necessarily even grade. I mean, you don't have to tell your students that. You could tell them you're going to grade it and not actually grade it eventually, but it's definitely something that I would recommend trying it out if you've never tried it out, because like I said, it's I do think sometimes students in an online class get burnt out on discussion boards. So I think anything we can do to kind of mix it up and try to give them something new. um and like I said, this could be something that they use as like a note-taking system for themselves too. It doesn't have to be one discussion board for like the entire class. It could be an individual thing that you have students do, and all they have to do is like share the link to their Padlet in Canvas and you can just go there and check it out. So I'm gonna go ahead, and I know we're probably, because this was supposed to be an hour long, right? So I know we're getting close. I'm not gonna have you guys necessarily do the right mixed pair share, but this is how I would do it if I were to have you guys do it. So I would have you write down your favorite engagement strategy that you use in class. If you don't have one, you could talk about which one sounds the most interesting. I like to do fun things where it's like find someone who has the same birthday months as you or something like that. Giving an opportunity to have students like learn a little bit more about like the other people in their groups and their class. Um, and plus it just like it gets rid of the awkward like who's gonna speak first, because you're basically telling them who's gonna speak first in their group. And so after you have them share, you have them switch, and then once they've all talked to one another, both on paper and verbally, I would basically, that's when I would do the random selection. But you have the engagement first where they're talking to one another, they're writing first before you call on them. So that way you know that hopefully everybody in the class has like at least made an attempt to answer the question you're about to ask. So rather than just randomly calling on students, I would recommend doing this first, so that way you know more people are engaging with your activities or with your content. So again, reasons why it's more random, better than just calling on random students. It got people out of their seats. It gave them a chance to interact. You saw more equal participation amongst the class. And even though I still called on people or would call on people, you would also be able to walk around and hear other people's conversations and kind of hear what they're saying. And if you hear that somebody may be off like track or something, you can correct it before they have a chance to share with the class, which is always good because it builds confidence in your students when you do it that way. Okay, so now is Q&A time. Again, I am, like I said, not an expert, no more than probably any of the rest of you, but these are just some of the things that I've done in my classes to try to make it more engaging and hopefully more interesting for our students. who may not always be interested in English. So
One thing that I did, Seth, not quite the podcast I did, but they had to do some brainstorming. And I let them either do like video or audio where they could just talk about it. And I had one student who was going through his book. It was really great because he was talking about what captured his attention. And he actually made a long video. And then I had a couple of students who did audios. And it was a nice break for me to listen and watch instead of reading. So
yeah.
I'm going to do more of that where, sort of like if you want to just talk, you can. Would you share your PowerPoint with us? It was too fast for me to judge. Yeah, there was a lot in it.
Yeah,
That
I
would be
apologize. If, like I said, I'm sorry if I went too fast, but yeah, if I will share the slides with you guys. And then I also, if you have any questions, here, I'll put my email in here.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, well, I went through a bit of a teaching credential before I got hired here, and I actually learned so much in it. And I think there are times where people think like, oh, well, I teach college, what can I learn? High school, but it's like you learn you guys do so many practical things. So I think it's good, like you have both that high school and that college, and there's so much crossover in what you can do to make the class more engaging. So I appreciate your knowledge.
Yeah, so I shared the link. I shared my email in the chat. So if you ever want to email me, if you have questions about how to use anything like how to use the podcast or the Padlet or quizzes or anything like that, definitely let me know. And just in general, if you just want to say hi, you can do that too. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But yeah, but if you guys have any other questions, again, feel free to let me know now. That way I can hopefully answer it and hopefully help you guys out.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have questions? Put it in the chat. I know some of you are probably, well, I know Haria is teaching and we always have other things going on in the background, right? So
Yes,
yeah,
we're never 100% off duty.
no, I love the podcast idea though. I want to find a way of incorporating that because I think sometimes, especially with students using AI, if they had to do that podcast and talk with each other, and it might be fun. I don't know. Even in a face-to-face class, like
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely like doing it either fully online or in person. It works great for either style.
um, anyway, okay. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I appreciate. Thank you so much for coming, Seth.
Yeah, no
And
problem.
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. Stop the recording.